The night over Helmand Province carried a silence so heavy it seemed to press against the eardrums. The sand had stopped moving. The wind had gone still. In that quiet, in the dust-choked valley of Sangan, a convoy of United States Marines disappeared. 340 men, 7 armored transports, and 1 radio transmission, then nothing. At Camp Leatherneck, miles away, inside the operations tent lit by flickering green monitors, Captain Erin Wallace listened to the static. She'd been sitting there for hours, her flight suit half unzipped, a coffee gone cold by her elbow. The radio crackled once, twice, then fell into the same hollow hum that had haunted the base all evening. The chatter from other pilots faded as officers drifted away, tired of hoping for a signal that wasn't coming. She couldn't leave. Something about the silence didn't sound right. When you've spent years in combat zones, you learn that silence is never peace, it's an omen. The first reports had come just after dusk. The 19th Expeditionary Unit was ambushed en route to a supply post near the Helmand River. Command lost visual contact minutes later. Drones circled but saw only fire and smoke. When the smoke cleared, the heat signatures vanished. The official call came through at 20:46 hours. Unit presumed KR, recovery operations pending daylight. Presumed Kia. Erin stared at the words printed on the report. Her stomach twisted. She'd flown resupply to those same Marines 3 days ago. She remembered their jokes, their dust-covered grins. One kid from Texas who asked her if helicopters could dodge rockets, like in the movies. She told him no, but she smiled anyway. Now that kid might be ashes scattered across the valley. She rubbed her temples, trying to banish the image. Outside, the desert stretched endless and black, stars like shrapnel against the sky. Somewhere beyond those ridges, 340 men either lay dead or waited for rescue that might never come. A voice broke through the tent flap. "Captain Wallace, you still here?" It was LT, Marcus Heller, her co-pilot and closest friend on base. He stepped inside, helmet under his arm, eyes bleary from a double shift. "You know the brass called it," he said. "They're standing everyone down till dawn." Erin didn't answer. She adjusted the headset, tuned the frequency again. Nothing but static. Marcus sighed. "Erin, we can't do anything till Command authorizes air recon. You know the rules." She finally looked at him, her blue eyes sharp and unblinking. "I also know that silence like this doesn't happen naturally," she said. "Not in Sangan. Not with that much metal on the ground. Someone should be pinging. Even if it's just a beacon." He hesitated. Maybe the gear got destroyed. Maybe, she said. But she didn't believe it. Erin had flown combat extraction since Iraq, logged more night flight hours than any pilot in her wing. She trusted her instincts, the gut feeling honed from years of dodging bullets and watching men live or die based on a single decision. Tonight that instinct screamed that something was wrong. She swiveled toward the main monitor. The satellite feed replayed in black and white infrared. Smoke pillars, craters, scattered vehicles. Then darkness. She scrubbed back, zoomed, adjusted filters. A faint shimmer caught her eye, barely a pixel. She froze the frame. Enhanced again. A tiny flicker, rhythmic. Her pulse quickened. She knew that pattern. Short, short, long. It wasn't random. It was a distress signal, Marine issued in fried. Someone out there was alive and trying to be seen. Erin grabbed a screenshot, printed it, and bolted from the tent. The command bunker stood at the center of the base, guarded by 2 MPs. Inside, the air smelled of diesel and sweat. Generals hunched over maps, tired voices muttering logistics. When Erin burst through the door, papers fluttered. "Sir?" she said sharply, holding up the photo. I found this on the thermal feed. Looks like a live beacon. It's coming from Grid 17 Bravo, near the ambush site. The operations chief, Colonel Derek Hayes, barely looked up from his clipboard. That zone's compromised, Captain. Taliban's swarming it. We'll send recon at dawn. Sir, with respect, that beacon's intermittent. If we wait till dawn, whoever's there won't last till sunrise. Hayes exhaled through his nose, the way men do when patience is thinning. Captain Wallace, your assignment is medevac readiness, not recon coordination. Dismissed. The words hit like ice water. She'd been dismissed before for questioning, for suggesting, for being the only woman in a room full of men trained to obey without doubt. But never when lives were on the line. Sir, she pressed, voice trembling now, those are Marines out there. His gaze hardened. And you'll lose a helicopter if you try to play hero. That's an order. Erin's hands curled into fists at her sides. Understood, she said quietly. Outside the bunker, the desert wind had picked up again, whispering across the tarmac. She stared out at the dark horizon, jaw tight. Behind her, the flag above headquarters snapped in the wind like a whip. Marcus caught up with her near the flight line. What happened? They wrote them off, she said. Just like that. He cursed under his breath. Erin looked toward the row of helicopters gleaming faintly under moonlight, their rotors still, their engines silent. Machines built to save lives, sitting useless because someone said wait. She couldn't, not tonight. She walked back to the comms tent and shut the flap behind her. Her hands moved automatically, loading flight maps, checking coordinates, pulling weather data. Each click steadied her pulse. The tiny flare on the screen blinked again, fainter this time. She whispered, "Hold on." The radio hissed suddenly, a half-second of voice, garbled but human. "Anyone, this is unit, down, need help." Then static. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She tried to trace the transmission. The signal was weak, barely clinging to the edge of the band. But it was enough. She wrote down the frequency and coordinates. The flap opened again. Marcus stood there, face pale. "You're not thinking what I think you're thinking." She met his eyes. "They're alive, Marcus." "I heard them." "That doesn't mean we go rogue." "No one else is coming," she said. "Command made their choice. I'm making mine." He stared at her, torn between fear and loyalty. After a long moment, he muttered, "If we're doing this, we'll need fuel, and at least one crew medic." She almost smiled. "Then let's move before someone notices." They stepped into the cold Afghan night. The base was quiet except for the hum of generators. Far off, the horizon flickered orange distant artillery. Erin's boots crunched over gravel as she headed for Hangar 4, where her bird, Red Sky 9, sat waiting. Inside, she ran her hand along the fuselage. The paint was scarred from years of combat, but it still felt alive under her fingers. "We've got one more fight," she whispered to the machine. Marcus started the pre-flight checks. The low whine of turbines began to echo through the hangar. Every sound made her heart pound faster. Each minute they waited risked discovery. Then the base siren wailed faintly, shift change. Perfect cover. She slipped into the cockpit, buckled her harness. The instrument lights glowed green, reflecting in her eyes. "Engines hot," Marcus said. She pressed her headset to her ear. Somewhere beyond the mountains, a faint signal repeated, short, short, long. The same pattern. Still alive. "Copy that," she whispered. "I'm coming for you." The rotors spun faster, stirring dust into whirlwinds. Ground crew looked up in confusion, some waving, thinking it was a scheduled test. Erin didn't look back. Through the glass, she saw the camp lights shrinking, the vast darkness of the Afghan desert swallowing everything. Behind her, 340 Marines were waiting for salvation. Ahead of her, orders be damned, was the road to hell. And Captain Aaron Wallace, against every regulation, every command, and every fear, had just begun her flight into it. The desert swallowed the sound of the helicopter as soon as it lifted off. From a distance, the CH-53 Super Stallion was just another shadow against the black sky, its rotors slicing through moonlight, its crew silent and tense. Inside, Captain Aaron Wallace sat in the pilot's seat, eyes locked on the instruments, heartbeats sensed with the steady hum of the engines. No authorization, no backup, no one watching their six. Just a pilot, her crew, and 340 missing Marines. Beside her, LT. Marcus Heller adjusted his headset, his jaw clenched tight. "You realize we're dead if they catch us," he muttered. Erin didn't answer. Her eyes traced the horizon, empty mountains, dry riverbeds, faint smoke trails twisting in the dark. She was calculating every variable: altitude, visibility, terrain shadows, anything that could keep them below radar. The desert night was both their enemy and their only protection. "Red Sky 9 to all channels," she whispered into the mic, though she knew command had already locked her out. "If anyone's listening, hang on. We're coming." Static replied. The chopper dipped low, skimming the ground. Dust whipped around them. From above, no satellite could see them now. Marcus exhaled, almost laughing from disbelief. "We're ghosts, Aaron. Flying ghosts." She smirked faintly. "Good. Ghosts don't get shot down." 2 miles below, the Sanguine Valley sprawled in the shadows like a sleeping beast. Even from the air, Aaron could see the scars of the earlier battle-charred Humvees, blackened craters, the faint glint of twisted metal reflecting moonlight. The whole valley looked dead, but her instincts screamed otherwise. "Infrared," she ordered. Marcus flipped the toggle. The screen came alive with flickers of heat. The wrecks glowed faint orange, the ground radiated faint warmth. Then there it was again. A tiny pulse, barely visible. Short, long. Her throat tightened. "That's them." Marcus leaned forward. "You sure?" "Could be a trap. Taliban used decoys too." "Not that pattern," she said. "That's Marine Code Delta Distress Beacon. Someone's alive." She banked the chopper slightly, aligning the nose toward the flicker. From the back, Sergeant Bear Douglas, their gunner, shouted over the intercom. "You're telling me we're heading right into the zone Command told us to stay out of?" Aaron replied calmly. "Exactly." Bear muttered something that sounded half prayer, half curse, then swung his turret into ready position. Back at Camp Leatherneck, alarms were beginning to sound. The control tower had noticed one of the helicopters missing from its pad. Radios crackled with angry voices. Command officers scrambled to track her transponder, but Aaron had already disabled it. Inside the cockpit, she felt the weight of that decision. There was no going back. She had crossed the line between duty and defiance. Yet, deep down, she knew this wasn't about rebellion. It was about loyalty. Real loyalty. Not to a rulebook, but to the men on the ground. "Talk to me, Marcus," she said. "Wind direction?" "Northwest, 15 knots. Visibility low. No drones overhead." "Perfect," she said. He looked at her sideways. "You scare me when you say that." "Good," she replied. "Means you're paying attention." The crew chuckled lightly, tension breaking for a second. Then the chopper hit turbulence, jolting everyone back into silence. By 0300 hours, they reached the mouth of the Sanguine Valley. The landscape below looked like something out of a nightmare, an ocean of black rock and dust, scattered with the wreckage of war. Aaron descended another 50 feet, guiding the chopper between canyon walls, barely wide enough for the blades to clear. Radar's picking something up multiple heat signatures ahead, Marcus warned. Enemy? Could be. Erin didn't hesitate. Weapons hot. Bear locked the .50 caliber turret into place. The medics behind him, Corin Reyes and Sullivan, tightened their harnesses, faces pale but determined. Everyone on board understood the risk. Erin's voice dropped low, almost reverent. We go in fast, we come out faster. No mistakes. We're their last shot. Roger that, Marcus said softly. As they rounded a ridge, the radio burst to life-broken, desperate voices. This is Delta Team. We're pinned. Heavy fire. Coordinates? Repeat. Erin froze. That was no ghost. That was proof. Copy that, Delta, she shouted into the mic. This is Red Sky 9, hold your position. We're inbound. A pause. Then a voice, cracked but alive. Who the hell? Is Red Sky 9? She smiled grimly. The cavalry. Back at command, chaos erupted. The operations chief slammed his fist on the table. She took off without authorization? Yes, sir, a technician stammered. No transponder, no comms, no escort. Get her back now. But by then, Erin Wallace was already off the grid. And somewhere deep inside that Forbidden's Valley, the Marines she'd been ordered to abandon had just heard the sound of rotor blades slicing through the sky. Inside the chopper, Erin's eyes darted between instruments and terrain. The faint outline of smoke columns appeared ahead. There, she pointed. Marcus nodded. We're close. Half a mile out. Bear gripped his gun tighter. Contacts on the ridge. Movement left. Erin jerked the stick, banking hard. Tracers lit up the night, streaks of orange and red slicing past the cockpit. The windshield rattled as bullets pinged against armor. Hang on, she yelled. The helicopter roared through the gauntlet, engines straining, rotors screaming. Marcus returned suppressive fire from the side window, while Bear unleashed hell from the rear gun. Shells clinked against the floor. The valley echoed with chaos. When they finally cleared the ridge, Erin saw them, dozens of Marines huddled in craters, wounded and bloodied, signaling frantically toward the sky. Her chest tightened. They were alive. She pulled up, circling once. We can't land yet, it's too hot. Marcus glanced at the fuel gauge. We've got 20 minutes tops, and we make them count. She steadied the helicopter at a hover, just out of range of RPGs, watching the Marines below wave their tattered signal flags. One of them looked up, pointing at the sky as if praying. For the first time that night, Erin felt something fierce hope. All right, she said, voice calm again. We're going to get them. Every damn one. The chopper turned back toward the base for the briefest refuel, the dawn still hours away. The crew was silent. Even Marcus didn't speak. The adrenaline had faded, leaving only the weight of what they had done. Erin didn't look back. Her hands stayed steady on the controls, eyes on the dark horizon. She knew she'd crossed a line no one could uncross. But she also knew this. The world could forgive a pilot for breaking orders. It could not forgive her for leaving 340 Marines to die. When they landed at a remote refuel point, Marcus finally broke the silence. Erin, you realize when we go back, they'll court-martial you. She unbuckled, stepped onto the dirt, and looked up at the fading stars. If we make it back, she said, they can do whatever they want. He shook his head, smiling in disbelief. You really are impossible. She looked at him, expression hard. You joined me, didn't you? He laughed once. Guess that makes me impossible too. Back inside the helicopter, she checked her maps again. The coordinates of the Marines burned into her mind. The signal flickered one last time, weaker now, as if fading with every second. Erin stared at it and whispered, "Hold on, boys. Just hold on." Then she keyed the intercom. "Refuel complete?" "Affirmative," said Reyes. "Then let's go bring them home." The engines roared back to life, thunder rolling across the desert. As the chopper lifted into the night once more, the wind carried her last words before the radio went silent again. "They told me to stand down. I'm standing up instead." And with that, Captain Erin Wallace and her rogue crew vanished back into the darkness, toward a valley the world had already given up on. The desert was still dark when the Super Stallion thundered back into the sky. Its rotors chopped through the silence, throwing up dust and shards of moonlight. Inside the cockpit, Captain Erin Wallace leaned forward, eyes unblinking as she stared into the black horizon. She had the coordinates memorized now, every ridge, every ravine, every deadly corner of the Sangan Valley, etched into her brain like a map carved by fire. They weren't supposed to exist anymore, this crew of hers. But they did, because she refused to let 340 Marines vanish into silence. Behind her, the cabin glowed dim red. Alt-T, Marcus Heller checked the radar, muttering updates under his breath. No drones overhead. Radio jamming's heavy. We'll lose all comms once we hit the valley again. Then we go quiet, Erin said. Roger that. The two medics, Corman Reyes and Sullivan, secured the stretchers and medical kits to the cabin floor. They worked fast, methodically, but their eyes betrayed the truth. They were terrified. The gunner, Sergeant Bear Douglas, stood by his .50 caliber turret, massive hands resting on the handles like a ritual. A toothpick hung from his mouth. His eyes were narrowed to slits. "This is suicide," Bear said flatly. "We're one bird, Cap. They've got RPGs, heavy machine guns, and probably half the Taliban army sitting on that ridge." Erin turned in her seat. Her voice was calm, steady. "Yeah, maybe. But we've also got something they don't." Bear frowned. "What's that?" She smiled slightly. "A reason." Bear stared at her for a second, then nodded. "Then let's go earn it." The wind howled as they dropped altitude. Erin's hands danced across the controls, every movement precise. Flying this low at night was almost impossible. One wrong move and they'd slam into the rocks. But Erin didn't waver. Her instincts were tuned to the machine. She felt every vibration, every shift in the airflow, like it was part of her body. Marcus glanced sideways at her. "How can you be this calm?" She gave a short laugh. "Because I don't have time to be scared." He shook his head. "You're insane." She smirked. "I prefer determined." They flew another mile in silence before Marcus spoke again, voice quieter this time. "You know, I used to think orders were everything. That following the book kept people alive." Erin's eyes flicked to him. "And now?" He hesitated. "Now I think maybe the book forgot about people like you." Her expression softened for a brief second, then hardened again as the radar pinged faintly. Contact ahead. Terrain's changing. She eased the stick forward. The helicopter dipped into the valley. The Sangan Valley unfolded beneath them like a scarred wasteland. Smoke still rose from the craters left by last night's battle. The wrecks of marine transports glimmered faintly in the moonlight, mangled hulks half buried in sand. The air shimmered with heat and gunmetal. Marcus switched to infrared. The monitor came alive with flickers of orange and red. "Got something," he said quickly. "Movement at grid 17 Bravo, multiple signatures. Some small arms fire, too. Friendly?" Erin asked. "Can't confirm. Then we find out the hard way." She throttled up. The helicopter roared forward, skimming over broken dunes and scorched brush. Below them, a handful of glowing figures darted between the wrecks. Then gunfire erupted from the ridge-long streaks of tracer rounds ripping through the dark. Contact! Right side! Bear shouted. The entire chopper shuddered as bullets smacked into its armor. Sparks danced off the fuselage. Aaron pulled hard left, diving behind a hill. The world tilted. Marcus grabbed the console to steady himself. Jesus, they're lighting us up. Hold tight, Aaron growled. She popped up from cover, banking toward the ridge. Bear, light them up. Bear's gun thundered. The .50 cal rounds tore through the hillside, spraying dust and debris. The Taliban gun positions fell silent, one by one. But then a flash RPG. Missile. Marcus shouted. Aaron yanked the controls. The helicopter twisted violently. The rocket screamed past, missing by meters, exploding against the rocks below. The shockwave rocked them, alarms blaring. Damage report. She called. Marcus checked the screens. Tail's good. Hydraulics are shaky, but holding. We're still flying. Then we're fine, she said, gritting her teeth. Find me a spot to land. Marcus scanned the valley. Nothing flat enough for 2 clicks. Aaron's jaw clenched. We'll make one. They came in low, rotor wash blowing up clouds of dust. The Marines below waved frantically, their silhouettes flickering against the glow of burning vehicles. Aaron spotted a half-collapsed ridge that might work barely. Hang on, she warned. The super stallion slammed down hard, its skids crunching into rock and dirt. The impact rattled teeth. Bear was already firing at the ridges above, suppressing enemy gunners. Go, go, go! Aaron yelled. Reyes and Sullivan jumped out first, sprinting through smoke and chaos. The air reeked of gunpowder and blood. Wounded Marines crawled toward the helicopter, dragging their brothers. Some were missing limbs. Others barely clung to consciousness. Aaron kept the engines running, ready for an emergency lift. Bullets sparked against the hull. Marcus leaned out the door, firing his rifle between bursts. A Marine stumbled toward them, collapsing just short of the ramp. Reyes dragged him inside. He's alive, she shouted. 5 more coming in. Sullivan yelled over the gunfire. Aaron's heart pounded. Every second on the ground was suicide. Bear, suppress the right ridge, she ordered. Copy that. His turret spun, spitting fire. The roar echoed through the valley. The enemy's gunfire faltered. Marcus, how many on board? 13 wounded, 3 critical. That's all we can fit, she said. We'll come back for the rest. Marcus looked at her like she was insane. You want to make another run? She met his eyes, steady as ever. You want to leave them here? He didn't answer. He just grinned faintly. You're the boss. Lift off, she shouted. The helicopter clawed upward, heavy with men and pain. The engines groaned, straining against the weight. RPGs flashed below, one exploding so close that the shockwave sent them lurching sideways. Aaron fought the controls, keeping them level. Come on, baby, she muttered to the machine. Don't die on me now. They broke over the ridge, the valley shrinking below them into smoke and chaos. The wounded Marines groaned on the floor, blood pooling beneath them. Reyes worked frantically, pressing gauze to wounds, shouting vitals over the noise. Aaron barely breathed. Her mind was already ahead calculating, planning the next run. There were still hundreds more down there. Command's going to crucify us, Marcus said, voice half laugh, half shake. Then I'll die smiling, Aaron said. He looked at her and saw it, the fierce calm in her eyes, the same fire that had carried them this far. He shook his head. You know, if you weren't such a pain in the ass, you'd make a hell of a legend. She gave a thin smile. Legends are just people who didn't quit. When they cleared the mountains and the horizon began to lighten, Marcus finally exhaled. "We made it." "First run," she corrected. "First run?" he repeated, incredulous. She nodded. "They're still down there." Aaron looked at the hull. He pointed. The helicopter was riddled with bullet holes, hydraulics leaking fluid, one rotor blade chipped. "We barely made it out alive." She looked straight ahead, eyes on the horizon. "Then we fix it and go back." Marcus stared at her, speechless. Then, slowly, he smiled. "You're serious?" "Completely." Back at the remote refuel post, mechanics stared in disbelief as the chopper touched down. Smoke poured from the tail, the fuselage scarred and cracked. Marines rushed to unload the wounded. The men they saved were half-conscious, whispering thank you as medics carried them away. When Erin stepped off the ramp, her flight suit was smeared with grease and blood. The wind tugged at her hair. She looked out toward the distant valley, still burning, still echoing with gunfire. She whispered to herself, "Hold on, boys. We're not done." Marcus approached quietly, wiping sweat from his brow. "You really think we can make it back there?" She met his eyes, her voice low but steady. "We don't think. We do." He grinned. "Then I guess we're the rogue crew now." She turned toward him, the faintest smile touching her lips. "No, Marcus. We're the only crew." The rotor spun again. The engine screamed to life. And as dawn began to bleed over the mountains, Red Sky 9 lifted off once more against orders, against odds, against reason flying back into the fire. Because that's what happens when a woman refuses to obey. The morning sun crept over the Afghan mountains, painting the sky in bands of gold and blood red. The desert wind carried the smell of smoke and burning fuel, the echoes of distant gunfire bouncing off the canyons like ghosts refusing to rest. Captain Erin Wallace stood outside the hangar, her flight gloves in one hand and her helmet tucked under her arm. The super stallion, her wounded bird, rested before her like a battered soldier, scarred, patched, but alive. Mechanics swarmed around it, replacing lines, welding holes, wiping off the soot that told stories no one wanted to relive. Marcus jogged up to her, his face smeared with grime. "Hydraulics are stable," he said, panting. "Fuel's full, ammo's topped. But the left rotor she's still chipped." "If it goes bad mid-her, then we pray," Erin interrupted. Her tone was calm, final. "How long till she's ready?" 10 minutes, he said. Erin nodded and turned away. She could feel the weight of eyes on her. Around the tarmac, Marines watched her in silence, some in awe, others in disbelief. Word had spread fast. The woman pilot who defied command and pulled 13 men out of hell. Now she was going back. Lieutenant Colonel Harland, the base commander, stormed toward her, fury in his stride. "Captain Wallace," he barked, "you are grounded. Do you understand me?" She turned to face him. "Sir, there are still over 300 Marines pinned down in that valley. And I said you're grounded." He thundered. "You disobeyed a direct order, nearly got your entire crew killed. You'll be facing a court-martial by morning, if you even—" "Sir," she cut in sharply, "those men don't have until morning." For a moment, the air between them froze. Harlan's jaw clenched. He stared at her, searching for weakness, for something that would make her yield. But her eyes didn't blink. They were cold steel. Finally, he exhaled through his nose. "You're going to get yourself killed." "Maybe," she said. "But they'll die for sure if we don't try." He looked away, hands on his hips, shaking his head. "You're insane, probably." Harland turned back to her, voice low. "You didn't hear this from me, but if I see a super stallion take off in the next 10 minutes, I'll assume it's a test flight." Their eyes met. Erin nodded once, No salute, no thank you, just understanding between soldiers who knew that orders sometimes had to bend. She turned and shouted, "Crew up! Wheels up in 10. The engines roared back to life, deep and thunderous. The deck vibrated beneath their boots as Erin climbed into the cockpit. Marcus strapped in beside her, glancing at the cracked instrument panel. "You know, we're going to run out of luck sooner or later," he said. "Then we make sure it's later," she replied. Bear grinned from his gunner seat. "That's my kind of math. Let's go bring our boys home," she said. The helicopter lifted off, rising into the bright, merciless sky. Dust spiraled beneath it like a storm being born. 2 hours later, the Sangan Valley appeared again, still burning, still screaming. Columns of smoke rose from the wrecks, twisting like black snakes. Erin could see flashes of movement far below, Marines huddled in craters, pinned by relentless gunfire. "Multiple heat signatures," Marcus said, staring at the infrared display. "Jesus, they're surrounded." Erin narrowed her eyes. "Then we break the circle." She pulled the helicopter into a steep descent. The valley exploded in chaos. Machine guns opened up from the ridges. RPG trails streaked through the sky like fiery arrows. Bear's turret roared in answer, spitting out a storm of lead. "Left ridge clear," he shouted. "But we've got more incoming north ridge, near the burned Humvee." Erin banked hard, tilting the chopper sideways. The world spun in sand and smoke. "Hold on," she yelled. The super stallion dove between the ridges, hugging the terrain so close the skids scraped dirt. Bullets pinged against the fuselage. Marcus cursed under his breath, fingers flying across the console. "Erin, we're hit on the tail stabilizer." "I can keep her level," she said. "Find me an LZ. Closest one's a dry riverbed half a click north." "Good enough." She nosed forward, dropping altitude fast. Below them, Marines waved flares, signaling. The valley floor was a patchwork of fire and blood, every sound drowned beneath the screaming engines. "Touchdown in 5. She shouted. The helicopter hit the ground hard, the landing gear digging into the dry earth. Dust swallowed everything. Reyes and Sullivan leapt out with stretchers as Marines dragged their wounded toward the ramp. "Let's move, let's move." Reyes screamed. Bear unleashed another burst toward the cliffs. "We're taking heavy fire." Erin kept one hand on the controls, eyes darting between gauges and the horizon. "We hold for 3 minutes, no more." Marcus glanced back. "We won't get half of them in 3 minutes. Then we'll get the half we can," she said grimly. The ramp filled with bodies, some crying, some silent. Blood pooled across the metal. The medics worked in chaos, cutting uniforms, tying tourniquets, shouting for morphine. A young Marine grabbed Erin's arm as he stumbled aboard. His face was blackened with soot. "Ma'am, they said you wouldn't come back." She met his eyes. "They were wrong." He nodded weakly. "You're an angel, ma'am." "Just a pilot," she said. "Now get in." Another explosion rocked the valley. Dirt rained onto the chopper. The ridge ahead erupted in muzzle flashes. "RPG incoming," Marcus yelled. Erin slammed the throttle forward. The missile streaked past, exploding behind them. The shockwave threw the helicopter sideways. Warning lights flashed red across the console. Hydraulics failing. Marcus barked. "Not yet," Erin said through gritted teeth. "Bear, suppress the ridge." "Copy that." Bear's turret thundered, lighting up the mountainside. Reyes leaned into the cockpit. "We've got 27 on board, Cap. If we don't lift now, we're sitting ducks." Erin's pulse pounded. "Everyone strapped in?" "Do it," Marcus yelled. She pulled the stick. The super stallion lurched upward, groaning under the weight. The engines screamed as the helicopter clawed into the air. Bullets chased them, streaking past like angry wasps. "Come on, girl," Aaron muttered. "Just one more climb." The bird trembled, every joint shaking. Marcus gripped the side rail, eyes locked on the altimeter. "We're clear of the valley." "Not until we're over the ridge," Aaron replied. A final burst of fire came from below. One round tore through the fuselage, shattering glass. Marcus ducked instinctively, cursing. "Everyone still breathing back there?" Aaron shouted. Bear's voice came through, rough but steady. "Yeah, but the bird's bleeding bad?" "So are the men," Aaron said. "Keep firing till we're clear." When they finally broke over the ridge, the desert opened before them, endless, blinding, beautiful. Behind them, the valley burned like hell itself. Marcus slumped in his seat, shaking his head. "That's 27 lives, Aaron. You just stole 27 men back from death." She didn't answer. Her eyes were still fixed on the horizon. "That's not all of them." "Aaron," he said softly, "we won't make another run. The hydraulics are toast. The engine's overheating. You push her again, and she'll fall apart." She turned to him, face streaked with sweat and dust. Then she falls apart, doing what she was built for. He stared at her, realizing she meant it. Every word. Back at base, chaos awaited. Mechanics shouted, medics rushed in, and officers demanded explanations. Erin ignored them all. She walked straight to the medical tent where the wounded were being unloaded. One Marine, barely conscious, caught her sleeve as she passed. His voice was hoarse, almost gone. "You came back." She squeezed his hand. "I said I would." Outside, Marcus caught up to her. "Command's furious. They're talking suspension, court-martial, the whole deal." She exhaled, eyes still on the valley's direction. "Let them talk. We're going back." He stared. "You can't mean that." "Not again." She turned to him, the faintest glint of determination in her eyes. "I'm not leaving anyone behind. Not one." Marcus rubbed a hand over his face, laughing bitterly. "You're either the bravest person I've ever met or the craziest." "Maybe both," she said. "Tell the crew to refuel." As the sun dipped low and the desert wind began to rise again, the rogue crew prepared for yet another mission, each one knowing it might be their last. But Erin Wallace had already made peace with that. Because for her, the war wasn't about orders anymore. It was about promises. And she had one left to keep. The desert night had returned, wrapping the base in uneasy silence. Floodlights swept across the tarmac as mechanics worked in shadows, their movements slow and hesitant. The Super Stallion, scarred from 2 battles, stood ready once again, patched, refueled, its metal frame trembling like it knew what was coming. Captain Erin Wallace walked toward it with steady steps, her flight suit half-zipped, dust clinging to her boots. Around her, whispers followed like a current of disbelief. No one expected her to fly again. No one thought she'd dare. But she was going back. Not because of orders, those had long since stopped mattering, but because 57 Marines were still alive in that valley, holding the line with dwindling ammo and fading hope. Marcus stood by the helicopter, holding 2 flight helmets. His eyes were bloodshot, his voice low. "You know this bird can't take another hit, Erin. She's hanging by threads." Erin took her helmet from him and fastened the strap. "So are they." He sighed, shaking his head. "You realize this is how legends die, right?" She looked at him, calm as ever. "Then let's die doing something worth remembering." Inside the chopper, the crew moved like ghosts, silent, precise. Bear loaded the last ammunition belt into his turret, his massive hands steady despite the tremor in his jaw. Race and Sullivan strapped in extra medical kits, their faces drawn but resolute. No one spoke. No one needed to. They all knew the odds. When Aaron climbed into the cockpit and powered the engines, the familiar vibration filled the air, a heartbeat of steel and fire. The rotors began to spin, faster, louder, until the ground itself seemed to shiver. Over the radio, a voice crackled through static. "Red Sky 9, this is command. You are ordered to stand down." "Repeat, stand down," immediately. Erin stared straight ahead. Her thumb hovered over the transmitter switch. Then she flicked it off. "Command's gone quiet," Marcus said. "Good," she replied. "So are we." And with that, Red Sky 9 lifted into the darkness one final time. The flight to Sangan was long and silent. The moon hung low, swollen and red like a warning. Erin flew without lights, hugging the ground to avoid radar. Every mile closer felt heavier, as though the desert itself was trying to hold them back. Marcus broke the silence. "Do you ever wonder why you do it? Why you can't walk away?" Erin didn't answer for a moment. The glow from the console painted her face in pale light. "When I was a cadet," she said finally, "my instructor told me something I never forgot. A pilot's job isn't to fly. It's to bring people home." Marcus looked at her, expression unreadable. "And if you can't?" She tightened her grip on the controls. "Then you keep flying until you can." The Sangan Valley appeared again, on the horizon a black wound under the moonlight. Even from miles out, they could see the flames. The radio picked up faint chatter from the trapped Marines' crackling voices. Calls for medevac, coordinates shouted between bursts of gunfire. "Multiple heat signatures at Sector 9 Delta," Marcus said. "Looks like they're trying to hold a ridge near the canal." Erin's voice hardened. "Then that's where we go." As they closed in, the first wave of tracers erupted from the cliffs. The sky lit up like fireworks. The chopper jolted as rounds slammed into its belly, taking heavy fire. Bear yelled, spinning his turret. The .50 Cal roared back, spitting flame into the darkness. Erin dove low, weaving between ridges, the terrain rushing past in flashes of dust and stone. "Marcus, I need smoke on that ridge." He grabbed a flare canister, cracked it open, and tossed it out the side. A plume of red smoke trailed behind them, marking the drop zone. "Coming in hot," Erin shouted. The helicopter slammed down near the canal, the skids skidding through sand. Marines burst from the trenches, dragging their wounded. The ramp dropped, and Reyes sprinted out under fire. 30 seconds. Erin yelled, "Copy." Reyes shouted back, "We'll take whoever can move." Machine gun fire rattled the hull. Bullets tore through the metal like rain on tin. Bear roared, firing non-stop to cover them. The valley was chaos, shadows and screams, gunfire and firelight. A mortar exploded nearby, sending shockwaves through the ground. The helicopter tilted dangerously. Stabilizers failing. Marcus warned, "Hold her steady." Erin barked, "We're not leaving yet." She could see them now, the Marines, bloodied and broken, crawling toward the chopper. One stumbled halfway, collapsed, and didn't move. Erin's throat tightened. "Reyes!" She shouted, "Get him!" Reyes didn't hesitate. She sprinted through the chaos, grabbed the fallen Marine, and dragged him back, bullets snapping past her legs. Sullivan ran to help, together hauling the man up the ramp. 20 on board. Marcus shouted, "That's max load." Erin looked at him, her jaw set. "Then we overload it." A rocket screamed through the night. Erin saw the flash too late. The explosion hit the tail section. The helicopter bucked violently, alarm screaming. The world spun in smoke and fire. "We're hit. Tail's gone." Marcus shouted, Aaron fought the controls with both hands, teeth clenched. We're not crashing here. The super stallion wobbled, dipped, then leveled barely 10 feet above the ground. Flames licked from the rear. Warning lights flared red across the dashboard. Hydraulics critical. Shut off rear power. Divert to main rotor. Aaron yelled. Marcus did it, his hands shaking. It's not enough. It'll have to be. Aaron yanked the collective. The helicopter clawed forward, just clearing a ridge. Behind them, the valley exploded in orange light. Marines inside the chopper prayed, coughed, screamed. Smoke filled the cabin. Reyes stumbled into the cockpit. We've got 4 critical. If we don't land soon, they won't make it. Nearest fob? Aaron called. Marcus checked. 30 miles northwest. She gritted her teeth. Then we'll fly 30 miles with one tail and a prayer. For the next 15 minutes, Red Sky 9 limped through the desert sky like a wounded animal. The rotor wobbled. Metal screeched. Marcus held the hydraulic pressure steady by hand, blood running from a gash on his arm. Every alarm screamed. Every part of the helicopter begged to die. But Erin refused. She whispered to the controls, voice calm, almost tender. Just a little farther, girl. You've got this. Marcus looked over at her. If we make it out of this, you're buying the beers. She managed a tired smile. Deal. Then the engine sputtered. Marcus's face went pale. We're losing power. Erin's hands tightened. Not now. Not here. The altimeter dropped fast. Erin, I see it. The desert rushed up to meet them. Erin pulled every lever she could, fighting gravity like it was a living thing. At the last second, she flared the nose. The helicopter hit hard, skidding across the sand, metal shrieking. Sparks flew. The bird tipped forward, then slammed to a stop. Silence. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Bear's voice came through, hoarse but steady. We're alive. Erin exhaled, trembling. Status? Marcus coughed, wiping soot from his face. Engines dead. Hydraulics gone. We're not flying anywhere. Reyes called from the back. The wounded are stable, Captain. But we need evac soon. Erin looked around, the desert stretching endlessly, smoke rising from the wrecked bird. The horizon was still glowing red from the burning valley. She unbuckled her harness. Then we hold the line until they come. Marcus frowned. You think they'll send anyone? She glanced back at the wounded Marines, then at her crew, filthy, bruised, but alive. They'll have to, she said quietly. Because we're not dying here. And as the first faint light of dawn crept over the dunes, Erin Wallace stood beside her crippled helicopter rifle in hand, jaw set, her crew behind her. They had come to bring their brothers home. And even stranded in the heart of hell, she wasn't leaving without them. The sun broke over the horizon like a blade of fire, slicing the desert open with its heat. The wreckage of Red Sky 9 lay half buried in sand and smoke, its rotors twisted, its tail section torn away. The metal hissed as it cooled, still breathing faint wisps of steam. Around it, Captain Erin Wallace moved among the wounded, her shadow long across the dust. Her flight suit was torn, her face streaked with soot and blood. She looked exhausted but steady, like someone who had already made peace with death hours ago. Her crew was alive, barely. Marcus had a broken rib. Bear's arm was bandaged, where shrapnel had ripped through muscle. Reyes and Sullivan were still treating the wounded Marines they dragged out of the crash. The sound of distant gunfire echoed across the valley, rolling like thunder. Contact will come soon, Bear said, scanning the ridges through binoculars. His voice was low, controlled, the calm of a man who'd seen too much war. Taliban'll be on us before noon. They saw where we went down. Erin nodded, squinting toward the horizon. The smoke from the burning ridge they just escaped curled into the sky like a signal flare. They know, she said quietly. And they'll come heavy. Marcus limped up beside her, a rifle slung over his shoulder. Command knows our position. I got a distress ping out before we lost comms. But they might not get here in time. How long? He hesitated. Could be hours. Could be all day. Erin looked back at the crash. The wounded Marines were scattered in the shade of the wreck, whispering prayers, clutching their rifles even in pain. There was fear in their eyes, but hope too. She'd given them that just by showing up. She turned to her crew. Then we hold the line until they do. Bear gave a grim smile. Just like old times? By mid-morning, they'd turned the crash site into a fortress. The twisted hull of the helicopter became their barricade. Sandbags from the cargo hold were stacked into makeshift walls. Broken doors became shields. Marcus helped rig the remaining .50 cal turret on top of the wreck's frame, its barrel facing the ridges. We've got maybe 500 rounds left, he said. Make 'em count. Bear chuckled darkly. Always do. Erin moved through the camp, checking positions, tightening straps, refilling magazines. Every motion was deliberate, efficient. She didn't speak much, didn't have to. Her presence was enough to keep everyone moving. Reyes emerged from the wreck, wiping sweat from her brow. We've got 4 critical. If we don't get evac soon, we'll lose them. Erin's jaw tightened. Then we don't lose them. Not while I'm breathing. Reyes nodded. She didn't argue. No one argued with Captain Wallace anymore. The first attack came just before noon. The sound started as whispers, distant pops of rifles in the wind. Then it grew, closer, sharper, until the whole valley erupted in gunfire. Bullets kicked up sand around the wreckage. The wounded ducked instinctively. Positions. Erin shouted. Bear swung the .50 cal around and opened fire. The heavy gun thundered, the recoil shaking the frame. The desert erupted in dust and fire. Marcus took cover behind a sandbag wall, firing short bursts at figures darting between rocks. 2 o'clock, 50 meters. I see him. Bear barked. He cut loose another burst, shredding the ridge. The Taliban fighters scattered like ants. Reyes crawled out to drag a wounded Marine back under cover. A round grazed her shoulder, tearing fabric. She hissed in pain, but kept moving. Erin ran beside her, grabbing the Marine's legs. Together, they pulled him to safety. The air was thick with gunpowder and heat. Medic! Sullivan shouted. I'm on it! Reyes yelled back, already pressing bandages to the wound. The attack lasted 20 minutes. Then just as suddenly, it stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the gunfire. Bear spat into the dust. They're regrouping. Testing us. Erin scanned the horizon. Then we passed the test. But she knew this was only the beginning. By afternoon, the sun was brutal. The desert shimmered, the air vibrating with heat. Sweat stung Erin's eyes as she reloaded her rifle. Her hands were raw, her lips cracked, but she didn't stop. Marcus sat nearby, trying to fix the radio with a bent screwdriver. Still nothing. The antennas fried. Erin crouched beside him. We'll hold till dark. If evac doesn't come by then, we move on foot. He looked up sharply. With 30 wounded? That's suicide. So's staying here. He met her eyes and saw the same unbreakable resolve that had carried them this far. You never quit, do you? She gave a faint smile. Not my style. Bear's voice cut through the moment. Movement. North Ridge. Erin snapped her head around, Shadows were moving again, dozens of them. This time, heavier weapons glinted in the sun. RPGs, Marcus shouted. Everyone down. Aaron yelled. The first rocket slammed into the sand 20 meters away, throwing dirt and debris into the air. The second hit closer too close. The explosion rocked the wreckage, blowing one of the makeshift walls apart. Bear, Aaron shouted. I'm on it. He roared. The .50 cow thundered again, ripping through enemy lines. The air filled with smoke and screams. Marcus grabbed his rifle and fired between bursts. They're flanking us. Aaron ducked low, firing until her magazine clicked empty. She swapped it fast, chambered around, and kept shooting. The chaos was deafening. Reyes ran past her, blood running down her arm. 2 more down one kier. Aaron's chest burned. Get the rest behind the hull. Go. The ground shook again as another RPG hit nearby. Shrapnel sliced through the air. Bear grunted, hit in the shoulder, but stayed on the gun. I'm good. Keep firing. Aaron crawled to him, her hand pressed over the bleeding wound. You're hit bad. He grinned through the pain. Takes more than that to stop a Marine. She looked into his eyes. Then let's make it count. He nodded once. Then they both turned back to the fight. Hours passed like minutes. The heat gave way to dusk, and the horizon burned orange again. The attacks came in waves, each one stronger than the last. But still they held. When the last shots faded, Aaron could barely hear over the ringing in her ears. Smoke hung thick around the crash site. Half their ammunition was gone. 2 more Marines were dead. Marcus sank beside her, his face gray with exhaustion. We can't take another wave like that. Aaron didn't answer right away. She looked at the sky instead, fading light. No sign of rescue. They'll come, she said finally. How can you be sure? Because if they don't, she whispered, then we'll die showing them what it means not to quit. That night, they waited in silence. The desert cooled, but the air still smelled of blood and oil. The stars came out cold and indifferent. Erin sat with her rifle across her lap, staring toward the ridge. Her mind drifted to all the flights before this, the training, the medals, the endless missions. None of it mattered now. Only this moment did. This handful of people who refused to give up. Marcus sat beside her, half asleep, still clutching his rifle. You ever regret it? He asked softly. She shook her head. Not once. Even if this is where it ends? She smiled faintly. Then it ends right. A faint rumble echoed in the distance, low, steady, growing louder. Marcus blinked, sat upright. Do you hear that? Erin's eyes widened. The sound grew a deep, rolling thunder from the west. Bear lifted his head, grinning through blood and bandages. That's not thunder. Moments later, lights cut through the darkness. Apache gunships, low and fast, streaking toward the valley. The ground trembled under their engines. Erin rose to her feet, breath catching in her throat. They found us. The Apaches swooped overhead, rockets lighting up the cliffs. The ridges erupted in explosions. Enemy gunfire vanished under the roar of American steel. Marcus laughed weakly, tears in his eyes. You actually did it. Erin stood there, bathed in firelight, her face streaked with dirt and triumph. No, she said quietly. We did. As the first medevac birds approached, her knees almost gave out from exhaustion, but she stayed standing, watching, because when you fought through hell, you don't kneel for victory. You stand for the ones who didn't make it. The sun was high when the first medevac helicopters arrived, their rotors churning the desert dust into towering storms. The air smelled of burnt metal, sweat, and smoke, but it also carried something else: hope, relief, survival. Captain Aaron Wallace stood atop the wreck of Red Sky 9, surveying the chaotic evacuation. Wounded Marines were loaded onto stretchers, slinged into the choppers that had come to save them. Some were crying, some laughing, some silently staring into the dust, too stunned to move. Marcus limped up beside her, supporting a bloody Marine. "You did it," he said, voice thick. "All of them." "We got them all." Erin shook her head slightly. "Not all, but most. Enough to matter." Bear sat nearby, arm still bandaged, turret unmanned but ever watchful. Enough to make our enemies think twice. Reyes and Sullivan worked tirelessly, shouting instructions to medics and Marines alike. Sweat poured from their faces. Blood stained their uniforms, but they moved with the same calm precision that had defined them since the first flight. The Apaches and medevac birds lifted the wounded into the sky, one by one. Erin watched as the last slinged Marine disappeared into the horizon, a blur of sand and rotors. Then she turned to her crew. "We go last," she said. Marcus frowned. "You sure? You've been hit, so has the bird." "This isn't necessary." Erin cut him off. "I don't leave anyone behind. That includes me." Bear grunted. Always the stubborn captain. Erin climbed back into the cockpit, Marcus following. Bear manned the makeshift .50 cal turret again, scanning the valley for any lingering threats. Reyes and Sullivan secured the remaining equipment, prepping for their extraction. The Super Stallion, battered but still breathing, groaned under their combined weight as the engines revved. Erin's hands tightened on the controls. "Ready?" she asked. Marcus nodded, swallowing his exhaustion. "Let's go home." The liftoff was tense. Every mile felt fragile. The helicopter's tail was gone, and every vibration reminded them of how close they'd come to death. But still, Erin flew with precision, guiding the wounded skyward, leaving Sangin Valley behind for the first time in days. Below, the valley stretched like a living, scar-charred earth, smoking ridges, broken vehicles, and scattered bodies. Erin's chest tightened. This place had tried to take them all. And yet, here they were. She leaned back, eyes on the horizon. "We made it," she whispered. "Barely," Marcus said, voice weak but smiling. Bear laughed through a groan. "I was starting to think the valley would eat us for breakfast." Reyes shook her head. "I don't care. We're alive. That's what matters." Sullivan added quietly, "And so are the Marines we saved." Erin closed her eyes for a moment, letting the words sink in. They were alive. They had brought most of the men home. They had fought their own odds, broken every rule, defied every command, and still, somehow, survived. Back at base, chaos awaited. Command officers, medics, and reporters swarmed the landing zone. Cameras flashed, radios crackled, and voices shouted in confusion and amazement. Lieutenant Colonel Harland arrived first, face flushed with anger and disbelief. "Captain Wallace," he bellowed, running toward her. "Explain yourself. You disobeyed direct orders, risked the lives of your crew and your men." Erin cut him off, calm, measured. "Sir, I saved lives. That was my mission." Harlan's jaw tightened. "You'll face a court-martial. You put yourself above the chain of command." "Above the chain of command," she said evenly. "Or above death?" He froze. The roar of helicopters drowned the air, and for a moment, even he had to pause. Marcus and Bear stepped forward, flanking Erin. "She's right," Marcus said firmly. "Every man we saved would be dead if we'd waited for orders." Bear added, voice low and steady. "We went in because someone had to. And she led us." Harlan's eyes flicked to the medics, to the wounded Marines being carried off, to the sky still streaked with rotor trails. He clenched his fists, anger warring with admiration. "You're all insane." Erin's gaze didn't waver. "Maybe, but we're alive. And so are our Marines." The press was waiting. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Microphones were shoved in her face. "Captain Wallace, did you disobey orders?" "Yes," she said simply. "Do you regret it?" "No. But what about the risks? The lives you could have lost?" "They were worth it," she replied. Her eyes flicked to her crew. "Every one of them." The crowd murmured. Some shook their heads, some nodded, some whispered admiration. In a matter of hours, her defiance spread across military networks, social media, and news outlets. The story of the rogue flight that saved 340 Marines was everywhere. Command couldn't ignore it. The formal court-martial loomed, tense and clinical. The courtroom was packed. Uniforms, medals, and faces stared down Erin and her crew. Lieutenant Colonel Harland presented the charges: disobeying direct orders, endangering equipment and personnel, acting without authorization. Erin stood tall, hands clasped behind her back. She didn't flinch. She had prepared, not with legal arguments, but with truth. When it was her turn to speak, she stepped forward. "I disobeyed orders," she said calmly. "But I did so to save the lives of my men." 340 Marines were left in a valley under fire, surrounded by the enemy. Waiting for authorization would have meant their deaths. My actions were not reckless, they were necessary. And they worked. There was silence. Then, slowly, the room filled with murmurs. Testimonies from the rescued Marines followed, each one recounting their fear, the hopelessness of their position, and the arrival of the super stallion that changed everything. One by one, the medics, crew members, and survivors spoke. Every story painted the same picture: Erin's leadership, her bravery, her refusal to give up. After hours of deliberation, the verdict was read. Captain Erin Wallace and her crew were honorably commended. Their defiance, while technically against orders, had saved hundreds of lives. Awards, medals, and recognition followed, cementing their names in military history. Lieutenant Colonel Harland, standing quietly at the back, shook his head in disbelief. He had argued for punishment. But even he couldn't deny the truth. Erin Wallace and her rogue crew had achieved the impossible. Marcus whispered to her after the ceremony. "You did it." Erin smiled faintly. "We did it. All of us." Bear clapped her on the shoulder. "Don't let anyone tell you you're not insane. Or brilliant." Reyes and Sullivan laughed softly, exhausted but relieved. And as the sun set over the base, painting the sky with streaks of gold and crimson, Erin looked out toward the horizon, toward every valley, every ridge, every impossible mission that had brought them here. She had broken protocol. She had defied orders. She had risked everything. And in doing so, she had shown what it truly meant to lead. Because sometimes, heroism wasn't about following rules. It was about saving lives. Months had passed since the rescue in the Sangan Valley. Captain Erin Wallace and her crew were back at base, the familiar hum of helicopters, orders, and military life replacing the chaos of the battlefield. But the memories lingered etched into every scar, every medal, every glance at the horizon. The halls of the base were quieter now. The wounded had healed, the dead mourned, and life had slowly resumed. Yet Erin's name echoed everywhere: whispers in mess halls, shouts of respect on the tarmac, letters from families of the Marines she'd saved. 340 lives, each one a story she carried like a fragile jewel. Lieutenant Marcus Heller, still nursing a lingering pain from his broken rib, met her on the tarmac one morning. He was holding a folded flag and a small box. "They're for you," he said, handing her the box first. Erin opened it carefully. Inside was a medal of valor, glinting in the sunlight. Inscribed beneath were the words, "For extraordinary courage and selfless service under fire." Erin's chest tightened. She traced the engraving with a finger, swallowing hard. "We all did this," she said quietly. Marcus shook his head. "Not all of us had to make the decisions you made." She looked at him, eyes steady. "And none of it would have mattered if you, Bear, Reyes, and Sullivan hadn't been there. Every life saved was because we worked together. Every one." Bear strolled up, still limping slightly, a grin plastered across his bloodied but healed face. "Don't get all sentimental, Wallace. Medal or no medal, we're still a bunch of crazy lunatics." Reyes laughed softly, adjusting her uniform. "I'm just glad we're all here to be crazy together." Sullivan added, "and that the valley didn't get the last laugh." Across the base, their story spread like wildfire. Veterans and recruits alike spoke in hushed, reverent tones about Red Sky 9, the helicopter that had gone into hell and returned. Photos of the crew circulated in magazines and newspapers. Military analysts debated the legality and risk of their mission, but everyone agreed on one thing. The courage displayed was undeniable. Erin sat in the officers' lounge one afternoon, sipping bitter coffee. Across from her, Harland quietly joined her. The man who had once thundered orders at her now looked reflective, even respectful. "I never thought I'd say this," he began, clearing his throat, "but you did the right thing." "Against protocol, yes, but right." Erin tilted her head. "I didn't do it for approval." "No," he admitted. "You did it for the Marines. And that's why we all follow leaders like you. Because when it comes down to it, someone has to make the impossible choices." Erin gave a small, wry smile. "Someone has to." The ceremonies continued over the next few weeks. Erin and her crew were decorated one by one, each medal a silent story of pain, bravery, and survival. Families came to visit, hugging their sons, brothers, husbands. Letters arrived from Marines she had saved, some of whom were now officers themselves. Each one told the same thing. "You didn't just save me. You showed me what courage looks like." One evening, Erin walked alone to the tarmac, looking at the sunset painting the sky in crimson and gold. The desert wind carried memories, the shriek of bullets, the roar of engines, the cries of men caught between life and death. She reached for a small photo in her pocket, a snapshot of her crew on the first rescue, exhausted, grimy, alive. She smiled faintly, placing it against the dashboard of a nearby helicopter. "They made it," she whispered. "We made it." Months later, the story reached military leadership. Policies were quietly changed to allow medevac pilots more discretion in emergency situations. Erin's rogue decision had set a precedent proof that sometimes the rules of engagement must bend to the demands of survival. For her crew, life returned to a semblance of normalcy. Bear requested a quieter post. Marcus continued flight training. Reyes returned to the medics unit, and Sullivan became a tactical instructor. Yet each of them carried a silent bond, the kind forged in fire and danger, unbroken by time or distance. Erin, meanwhile, was promoted, recognized not only for valor, but also for leadership that went beyond rank and orders. She visited families, mentored young pilots, and occasionally flew training exercises, but nothing compared to that valley, where decisions weighed more than medals, and courage mattered more than rules. 1 year after the Sangan mission, a reunion was held at the base. The surviving Marines, their families, and members of Erin's crew gathered around a newly erected plaque in honor of Captain Erin Wallace and the crew of Red Sky 9, who risked all to save their brothers in arms. Their courage and sacrifice stand as a testament to the power of leadership, bravery, and loyalty. Erin stood before the plaque, the desert wind tugging at her hair. She felt the weight of every life saved, every friend lost, every impossible decision made. Beside her, Marcus, Bear, Reyes, and Sullivan stood silently, their eyes reflecting the same mixture of pride and memory. A young Marine approached her, saluting. "Ma'am, sir," he said to the group, "you saved my platoon. We wouldn't be here without you." Aaron smiled faintly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Then live well," she said softly. "That's the best thanks I could ever ask for." The legend of Red Sky 9 spread beyond the military. Stories were told in classrooms, in training sessions, and at recruitment offices. Young recruits memorized the details, not the politics, not the medals, not the headlines, but the courage, the defiance, the unwavering commitment to bring every Marine home. Erin watched it all unfold with a quiet satisfaction. She had never sought glory. She had never wanted recognition. But she had created a legacy, one built on courage, humanity, and the simple, unbreakable rule: no Marine left behind. In the evenings, when the desert grew quiet and the sun dipped low, she sometimes sat near the old tarmac, staring at the horizon where Sangan Valley lay far in the distance. She could still see it in her mind, the smoke, the flames, the terrified, desperate faces of the men they had saved. And she smiled, because she knew the truth. She had flown into hell and brought her brothers home. Years later, when asked about the missions in Sangan Valley, Erin Wallace would always deflect. She never claimed to be a hero. She never boasted. She simply said, "We did what we had to do. We followed each other. That's all any of us can do." But those who knew the story, the Marines, the medics, the crew, knew differently. They knew that a single decision, made in the heart of war, had changed hundreds of lives. That courage, in its purest form, didn't come from orders, medals, or protocol. It came from the heart. And so, the legacy of Erin Wallace and the rogue crew of Red Sky 9 endured, etched into military history, into the memories of the men and women who lived because of them, and into the hearts of those who understood that true heroism is measured not by accolades, but by the lives you choose to save. The desert wind whispered through the base that evening, carrying the sound of distant rotors, and Erin Wallace, standing tall among her crew, simply listened, because she knew that somewhere, in every valley like Sangan, there would always be a need for courage. And she had already shown the world what that looked like.